Very serious danger, he had said. What the fuck was that supposed to mean? This supposed Fr. Miller wanted to meet face to face. We never meet clients face to face. I'd only been contacted a handful of times by contract holders before. They aren't supposed to even be able to get our numbers. This was different though. Nothing this fucked up had ever happened before. It was like I was on autopilot. I agreed to meet without really even thinking. We'd meet in the park where everything seemed to be happening these days. Nice and public. I went armed just in case. If this was a serious client, they might try to attack me or something for failing. It's happened before in this business. I scoped out the meeting spot. The big walnut tree, from afar. There were two shady-looking guys wearing sunglasses hanging out underneath it. Neither of whom looked like a priest. Might have been a setup all along. These are strange times, aren't they, my friend? Came a voice behind me with a deep accent. I must have been all out of sorts to be caught off guard that badly. Nobody sneaks up on me like that. I whipped around and found an old-looking man behind me, much older than the bishop. Probably in his 80s. He loosened the collar of the light jacket he was wearing and pulled it down to reveal a priest collar. My name is Fr. Mueller. I understand we're breaking many rules meeting like this. I apologize. How did you even get that number? I asked. The deep web is a plethora of information. He said, those two suspicious-looking gentlemen over there are with me. I had a feeling you'd spy on things before meeting. You didn't let me down. It's better that just you and I talk anyway. Remember our friend here? He asked as he handed me a wallet-sized photo of the bishop. What is this guy's deal? Is it some kind of divine intervention? I asked half-heartedly. Quite the opposite, in fact. Fr. Mueller said, whether you believe in God or Jesus or any religion for that matter is irrelevant for now. You don't have to believe in your heart, but believe in what you've seen and experienced. This man should be dead. Should he not? Yes, 3 times, I said. We hired you 3 times to see what he may survive. He said. We weren't facing each other while we spoke. Rather, we stood next to each other, looking out into the park. Things are as bad as we feared. He is immortal now and we are out of time. Listen. I started. I want to know what the hell is going on here. Who is this guy and what do you mean he's immortal? I asked. I couldn't believe this conversation was even happening. I was entertaining this madness though because this guy had survived 3 attempts that should have killed him. This man is Bishop Cassius Canicus. Up until recently a most devout man of the cloth. Fr. Miller began. Cassius Canicus. Now that's a bad guy's name if I ever heard one. What do you mean up until recently? I asked. He has betrayed his oaths and has made a deal with the devil, so to speak. He has aligned himself with the demon Zazgazath. What? I asked, flabbergasted. A demon from hell itself. A very dangerous one few outside the Vatican have ever heard of. Is now Bishop Canicus' shadow. Very soon it will be strong enough to possess Canicus himself and will attempt to bring about the end of day. Should he succeed, the gates of hell itself will open and earth will be no more. So that's why his shadow was playing tricks on me that day. I remembered aloud. Come again, Fr. Mueller asked. I informed him of the bishop's shadow adventures that day after Mass and again in my home. That makes sense. Since it has not reached full power, it was unable to harm you. Only threaten, Fr. Mueller explained. This demon kept him alive then, I take it. I said, correct, Fr. Mueller. It will be particularly dangerous this time as it will be its 3rd attempt to bring about the end. It's been summoned before. I asked. Yes, the first time it was summoned was sometime around 32 BC in Egypt. It was defeated by unknown means by an Egyptian high priest. Fr. Mueller began. The second time it was summoned was 4,000 years later, in the 1190s during the Third Crusade, and was once again defeated, this time by Richard the Lionheart and his Holy Crusaders. It is said that King Richard wielded Excalibur during their battle and is the only reason he was able to defeat it. But that of course can't be verified and may be just a tall tale. What will be so different this time? I asked. Because Bishop Canicus will be the vessel, he will cast holy rites to help protect the creature. Mortal weapons have limited effect on the demon as is. This 3rd time no mortal weapon will be able to kill it. No mortal weapon can kill the creature, I thought to myself. Made me think of the mummy first of all, since I'm an idiot. But my mind also drifted to King Richard. Excalibur would not have been a mortal weapon. Maybe he did wield it. Could more legends like that be true than we think? What do we do? I asked, knowing goddamn well what his answer was going to be. We need you to kill it, Fr. Mueller said. I have one more contract for you. Not the bishop anymore. We need you to kill Zazgazath. I knew it. Why did I even ask? Fuck, how in the hell am I supposed to do that? I asked. Don't you have exorcists or something that can do a way better job than me? Doesn't the Vatican have special forces or something? Contrary to how movies or TV would have you believe, The Vatican does not have its own assassins, though we have a capable security and police force. What is needed here is a professional killer. Shit, how did I get mixed up in this? This must be my penance for living such a nefarious lifestyle all these years. Fuck, how would I kill it? I asked. Will you guys bless some bullets or do I need holy water or something? I'm afraid not. Even bless those are still mortal-made weapons. Not strong enough to destroy it. We have what you'll need. Come by the church on Front Street in a few hours. It's closed currently under the guise of renovations, but it's our base of operations. We parted ways after that. I went to the church later that day as instructed. The door was locked, but there must have been someone right on the other side, as a second after I tried to get in, someone opened it. Some shifty-looking priest who directed me toward a stairwell that went down. He showed me to a little room that must have been their headquarters. It was dimly lit, but it looked like the set of a police procedural or something. There was a bulletin board with the bishop's picture on it with scraps of paper pinned all around it containing little notes. Fr. Mueller was standing next to it. "Welcome," he said. Another priest dressed in red and black entered the room behind me. I may not go to church, but I know what a cardinal is. Pretty high rank, I think. He walked up to Fr. Mueller and spoke German to him. This must be legit. They're flying in these guys from Europe straight from the Vatican. These are trying times, Cardinal said to me. He never introduced himself formally. Never could we have foreseen having to turn to someone such as yourself. No offense intended. Your unique profession seems to make you the most qualified. How mysteriously he works. I felt out of place with all these holy people around me. I decided to get right down to it and ask what the plan was. How am I supposed to kill it? I asked. Cardinal made a motion with his left hand as if he was a mob boss or something, and another priest brought forward an elongated case of some kind. Either there was a musical instrument inside or a Tommy gun. He opened it up, revealing a small sword. More specifically, it looked like a Roman gladius. What the fuck is this? A sword? I thought to myself. Not what you were expecting. Fr. Mueller asked. He kind of sounded amused. Not really, was all I could muster. I mean, it was a nice sword. Looked to be in tremendous shape if it was authentic. I was a big fan of the Spartacus TV show from a while back, so I had a replica gladius myself. The handle was cheap, but the blade was real. Made for a good Halloween prop. I spoke earlier that no mortal weapon could kill Zazgazath when he possesses Bishop Canicus. Fr. Mueller began. This sword belonged to the second horseman of the apocalypse. The book of Revelation details the breaking of the 7 seals. The first 4 were the horsemen. This is the sword of a divine being and is therefore not a mortal weapon. It will destroy both Bishop Canicus and Zazgazath. The 4 horsemen now. I thought to myself, could this get any more ridiculous? Yes, Cardinal said. My perplexed face gave me away. The 4 horsemen happened, several times to be exact. Any world history book will detail the great wars and conquests of mankind and the famine and death that followed. Where did this even come from? I couldn't take my eyes off the sword. There's no way this was the second horseman's actual sword. I mean, there's just no way. Was there? Each of the horsemen have an associated relic? Fr. Mueller added. We very nearly lost them all to a police evidence locker in the early 2000s after a group of cultists stole them and attempted to summon the horsemen. Local police were able to stop it, and a mole we had in that group was able to require the artifacts with a little bit of subterfuge. Popular culture likes to theorize there is a massive vault beneath the Vatican that contains incredible artifacts and truths. Cardinal added, such a vault exists. Unfortunately, mankind will never be ready for the truths the vault contains and therefore must remain sealed. I'd heard of the supposed vault before. Sites like Cracked or Ranker and other conspiracy websites. I'll sit on the toilet for hours if I find a good one. I wish it were easier. Fr. Mueller said, you'll have to find a way to pierce Zazgazath with this sword. I'm sure you'll tap into all your proficiencies to achieve that goal. I didn't know what the fuck I expected, but I guess I didn't expect to have to use a sword. I was hoping to be able to stay at range. Getting right up in a demon's face didn't exactly sound like a good idea. According to our intel, Zazgazath will reach full power at midnight tonight, Cardinal said. We don't know where Bishop Canicus is right now, but he'll be at the cathedral downtown at that time for the ceremony. We'll open the side door on the residence side of the cathedral complex to get you in undetected. From there, God will be with you. That was pretty much it. Before I left Fr. Mueller took me aside. Remember, demons are woefully arrogant and overconfident. It will find the idea of you attempting to defeat it amusing and will see your skill set as far below its own. Exploiting that is probably your best weapon against it. The pep talk didn't help much, but it was nice of him to try and give me some last-minute advice. I went home to prepare for that night's event, thinking to myself, I'm not even going to go. This is all bullshit. My curiosity got the best of me though. I had to see this through. I wanted to see what would happen. or at least converse with the bishop to see what he had to say. The time came, so I made my way downtown. I went to the door they told me to, and it was propped open with a stone, and I slipped in. I kicked the stone out of the way so the door latched behind me. Didn't want anybody sneaking in behind me. I made my way through some hallways and a large meeting room as I went towards the church area where the altar was. The lighting was dim since usually nobody was up at this time, but I could still see well enough. I was almost there. I passed through what appeared to be the priest preparation area where they put on their robes and stuff. A couple chairs and a large wall mirror on the wall, as well as a closet with different color robes hanging. There was also a barrel or something to hold canes and a couple umbrellas. I paused for a second here and thought things through. The next stop was the altar. I realized I was ridiculously nervous. It hadn't actually hit me before. If everything was true, I was probably about to die. Worse yet, if everything was true and I failed here, it might signal the end of the world. It dawned on me right there, why the fuck did I come by myself? If I had told anyone though what I was doing, they'd have had me committed. I walked through a door and entered a large chapel. It was massive. The ceiling was seemingly hundreds of feet high and adorned with murals. Massive stained glass windows lined the sides of the room. It seemed big enough to fit a few thousand people in here for big masses like Easter or Christmas. All the lights were on, providing a lot of light. I saw Bishop Canicus, in full holy garb, standing on the altar with his back to me. He had some kind of staff in his left hand. It appeared to be made of gold and was adorned by gems. I entered the main aisle and slowly and quietly made my way towards the altar. Would I be able to stay quiet and ambush him? I got my answer as he slowly began to turn around. I see the visit from my shadow did little to deter you, he said. His voice was scratchy and husky. He had an accent I couldn't quite place. You are far too out of your league here, my son. The end will come quickly for everyone shortly. But if you stay, he will make sure it is very painful for you. Please go. Of course. The classic try to win without a fight gag from the big bad. Why'd you do it? I asked. You of all people should know Satan is nothing but lies and empty promises. I prayed for eternal life to any being that would listen. Only one answered, he said. You saw firsthand my prayers were answered. Before I could say anything else, I heard a thunderous gong from somewhere nearby. It was the church bell. It had begun to signal that it was midnight. A perfectly creepy, bad guy smile formed across his face. You were foolish to stay. Prepare to become the first victim of the wrath of Zazgazath, he yelled. He let go of his staff, but it didn't topple over. It remained standing upright. He had his arms outstretched slightly in front of him, and he began to levitate in midair. He then began to transform before my very eyes, that stupid smirk never leaving his face. Anyone that games knows what I'm talking about when I say what happened next was some serious Resident Evil bullshit. Zazgazath not only took over the bishop's body in its possession, it transformed it. The bishop's body began to grow larger, more muscular. The holy robes began to rip as his body grew, like he was Incredible Hulk or something. His hair began to disappear, and worst of all, his face began to melt away. But only partially, so that he still had skin hanging from his head, but his face was a red, bloody skeleton. His empty eye sockets ignited in flame, and I could see his hands turning black as they became elongated and dagger-like. Two small horns projected from either side of his chin and twisted downward. Similar horns began to form on his head as well that started spiraling upwards. His torso began to convulse as two enormous wings burst out of his back in a shower of red blood that completely coated the altar behind him. Most of his skin had turned to black char. Bones were visible here and there, and shredded skin hung about his large body, bleeding all over the floor. Bishop Canicus was gone. Zazgazath stood before me. Yeah, I'm fucked. It stood before me, a frowning grin of contempt its face. It was certainly amused. 800 years later, and it's still a man with a sword standing before me. It bellowed. It had a thunderously deep voice, almost robotic like Optimus Prime or Megatron. It then let out a roaring cackle of amusement. It stuck its hand out towards the staff that was still upright, and it floated towards it like Zazgoth was a Jedi. It grasped it in both hands and flapped its wings and took to the air. Shall we get on with it? This was it. I whipped out my .45 loaded with hollow points and put about 5 rounds into it. Bloody chunks spewed out from the entry wounds, but the demon didn't budge a millimeter. The wounds closed themselves almost instantly as well. I figured my gun would do nothing. I just wanted to see what would happen. It chuckled and then raised the staff into the air and flung it towards me like he was Zeus throwing a lightning bolt. I dove into a row of nearby pews as the staff obliterated an entire section of benches next to me. I then saw the staff return to Zazgazath via its telekinesis. I crawled further away since the pews were high enough to crawl under. I heard more pews get destroyed behind me, so I switched directions. Come out wherever you are, it roared. It certainly was enjoying itself. Random pews flew into the air. I could see Zazgazath from where I was, simply waving its arm here and there like it was some kind of Sith Lord. I crawled to the east side of the chapel. I decided to have any chance I had to get out of sight. There was a raised cubicle kind of area attached to a large stone pillar where readings took place so people could see who was reading. I might be able to sneak in there and hide for a minute. I stayed down and crawled around to the reverse side where the steps were. I got in without it seeing me. At least I thought so. It was quiet for a few seconds. Too quiet. I peeked over the railing and I could see it looking towards me. It knew where I was and appeared to be charging up some kind of energy attack. I dove out of the loft and hit the ground hard, just as some sort of energized fireball completely blew up the whole concrete support. If too many more of those were destroyed, the whole building might come down. Rubble rained down on me as I gathered my bearings and I could see it hovering again. The breeze from its flapping wings felt icy cold. I was lucky no huge chunks of rubble smashed me when they fell. This was fucking hopeless. There wasn't even a measurement for how out of my league I was. There was positively no way I was going to be able to get close enough to stab it. Richard the Lionheart was a badass. One of the greatest warriors in history. I'm sure he didn't have this much trouble. Seeing that I had landed near the door I came in from, I jumped up and dove into the hallway and retreated. It was much more cramped and the quarters were tight. This was the only advantage I could think of. I heard massive sounds of destruction behind me and I had just made it to the dressing room area when Zazgazath erupted through a concrete wall and bowled me over. The horseman's sword clanked on the floor as I had dropped it. The wind was completely knocked out of me and after a few seconds of catching my breath I took a knee rather than stand up completely. All I could see was Zazgazath in front of me. It had the sword in its right hand. As far as boss battles go, this was a train wreck. The most one-sided final showdown in the history of final showdowns. It had the only weapon that could destroy it. You thought this worthless trash would be my end. It bellowed, referring to the horseman's sword. Human arrogance knows no limits. Of course you never stood a chance. Its hand started to glow and after a few seconds the glow engulfed the sword completely before it shattered it into probably 1,000 pieces. I guess that's that. Fuck. Zazgazath started to cackle again. I had him right where I wanted him. I couldn't believe the setup worked, since I'm retelling this tale. Obviously you all know I don't die right here. The time had come to play the ace I had hidden up my sleeve. I reached over and grabbed the largest umbrella that was in the barrel of canes and umbrellas I had seen earlier and pulled it out. Zazgazath let out a snorting grunt of a laugh that usually comes from people caught off guard by something funny. I then popped the umbrella open. Ha 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 ha. It bellowed with its head back. I don't think I had ever heard anybody laugh so hard at something. Good. It was still roaring with laughter with its head cocked back, so I chucked the umbrella. Jumped to my feet, yanked the horseman's sword out of the barrel and rushed in and drove it into its chest. This all took about 3 seconds. Its laughter was immediately cut off with a howl of pain. It backed up and put its hand on the blade as if trying to pull it out. It swayed and breathed heavily. Falling to one knee, it looked up at me and I could see its flaming eyes begin to dissipate. It let out a few more gasping breaths before it fell with a thud in front of me. After a few seconds the body began to dissolve and after about a minute all that was left was a black stain on the floor and the horseman's sword, which didn't have a mark on it. My Spartacus replica wasn't so lucky. It didn't just get broken during the battle. It had been completely destroyed. I had taken Afar Mueller's advice and took advantage of the classic bad guy overconfidence. Hide the real sword. Let him think I was helpless. Lead him there and hopefully he falls for it. That was the master plan. Somehow it worked. It was all mind games. I knew from the start it would take some sneakiness, some outthinking and a little luck to complete this contract. I returned the sword to Cardinal and Fr. Mueller. They were all priestly in their thanks and couldn't help but try and sway me from my lifestyle. There is always a way back, Fr. Mueller had said, despite being more or less a murderer. I could still come into the good graces of the Lord. I took his advice and have decided to try and earn an honest living. I still can't say I believe in a God. And church is still way too boring to attend, but I am no longer a hitman. Contracts are good money. I've made more than enough to keep me afloat. An honest job will keep me busy. My parting words to Fr. Mueller were next time you need a demon killed, call the Pope. Call anybody. Just don't call me.